What's up everyone? Welcome back to Fish Hex. Appreciate you stopping in for another video. Today we're going to talk about 14 things that every saltwater hobbyist should avoid. So let's go and get started. Alright, number one, try to avoid putting your hands in the tank as much as possible. Now I know this doesn't seem like a big deal to most, but you can honestly do a lot of damage to a reef tank by accidentally introducing chemicals from your hands. Now for those of you who work on farms, in factories, in car garages, or clean on a daily basis, you have a higher chance of adding these chemicals without even realizing it. One thing I like to do to prevent this from happening is plan ahead. So for those days that I know I'm going to be doing scheduled maintenance, I go ahead and I clean both my arms about an hour before I get into the reef tank. Now this process, I usually use Dawn dish liquid soap and clean just a little bit above my elbow, rinse with hot water, and pat with a paper towel. Now that will take care of the majority of any kind of chemicals or contaminants that you'll have on your arms. And what I do is about 5 minutes before I actually go into the reef tank, I'll go ahead and I'll just rinse both my arms under hot water and again pat dry with a paper towel. Alright, so we just covered when you know you're going to be in the reef tank. What about those other times where you just have to get in there at the spur of the moment? Now, your situation will dictate what you do. If you work in those fields that I mentioned earlier where you're exposed to chemicals, I would recommend that you go ahead and clean your arm with the Dawn dish liquid soap just to remove those chemicals, because I don't know what they might be. And I think you're better off getting a little bit of soap residue in the tank opposed to what those chemicals might be. So I would go ahead and just do the standard cleaning and then just do a heavy rinse for an extended period of time. Try to get as much of that soap residue off as you can, and then of course pat dry with a paper towel or a clean towel. Now in my situation, I don't work in that field, so I usually get away with just using hot water and rinsing my arms for a while, and then again patting dry with a paper towel. Alright, number two, along the same lines, do not use any kind of windex or cleaning agents on your reef tank. It will find its way in there and it's just not good. Also, for those of you who use those spray air fresheners that attach to the wall, be wary of where you put them. If you get a gust of wind from an air conditioner or from the door opening, when that sprays, it might send the spray over to the reef tank. Especially for those of you who do not have canopies and you have open top tanks, you're more susceptible to getting kind of chemicals and stuff like that in there. So just be wary of all that stuff. Now when it comes to cleaning the glass on the reef tank, I suggest you use a water vinegar solution. I personally use the spray bottle from the Dollar Tree. I fill it up 3/4 of the way with RODI and the rest with vinegar. Just spray the glass and use a paper towel to clean it. Alright, number three, this is a big deal and I will do a separate video later on, but working with Zoa and polycorals without the proper protection. Even just handling the frag itself, I wear proper protection because there's been times where they just squirt stuff out just because they feel like it. And you don't want that in your mouth, your eyes, and any cuts in your hands because it will jack you up, especially if you're allergic to that kind of stuff. You could die from it. And I know that sounds weird, but you can die from this polytoxin that they release. And it's, there's no coral worth your life and there's no hobby worth your life either. So I always recommend you either have a minimum of glasses to protect your eyes from all angles and gloves. Now if you want to go one step further, definitely get the full face shield. That's cool because there's been plenty of times that I've been working on those and they just squirt into your face. So you might have protected your eyes, but you can still get it in your nose, in your mouth, and you can still have an allergic reaction. Okay, number four, along the same lines, avoid touching anemones, specifically carpet anemones, with your bare hands. I always use rubber gloves now, but a couple years ago I didn't, and I had a negative reaction to a carpet anemone sting. I was out of commission for several hours. It was very painful through my whole arm, and it kind of went away, so I didn't go to the hospital. But just in case you have that same allergic reaction, just wear rubber gloves and will limit the chance of you getting stung. Alright, number five. I really shouldn't have to mention this, but I'm going to anyways. Do not hand feed your eels or your lionfish. Why would you try to hand feed an eel that can barely see and base most of its hunting off its smell? Once it gets close to the food, it's going to mistake your fingers as the food and you're going to get bit. Also with the lionfish, it can strike faster than you can blink. You can take the potential not only getting bit, but getting stabbed by the barbs. That is just something that you don't want anything to do with. The eel won't kill you for most instances. I know that there are some poisonous eels out there, but the lionfish is poisonous. You can die from that. So why would you even bother trying to hand feed these? Now if you want to get that experience, I know that I use chopsticks, which are about 1 foot long, and you can put the food on the end and extend the distance in which they have to go before they can bite your fingers. Alright, number six, avoid the temptation to overfeed your fish. As I mentioned in a previous video, fish look hungry. They just do. That's just how they are. Now, it's going to be different for every reef tank based on water volume, stocking levels, and filtration. But what I recommend you do is go ahead and feed your fish what they'll eat within a 5-minute period. Then remove the excess food before it has a chance to break down via using a fish net or whatever. Then also, I recommend you have a feeding schedule. What I personally like to do is feed nori every day and then feed my LRS food every other day, just the amount they'll eat within a 5-minute period. This just allows you to have better water quality and you don't have to worry about having any kind of excess nutrients and stuff like that. And it's just better overall for the reef tank. All right, number 7, avoid adding your fish to the main display without quarantining them. And I've mentioned this in about 50 videos on my channel. And if you've been around here for any period of time, you know that I'm very big on quarantine because I know the negative impact that it has on the reef tank when you don't do it. So just suck it up, Buttercup. Put the fish in a quarantine tank, treat them for parasites, and do not add them until the 4 or 5 weeks later when you know that they're parasite free. Now I know we all want to see the fish together. We all want to see them happy. And you will. You'll see them happy for a couple days until one of them breaks out with a parasite and then they all die. It's horrible, so just quarantine your fish. All right, number 8, along the same lines, but it has to do with coral. Make sure you dip all your coral before adding them to your reef tank. If you have the option, quarantine your coral in a separate system to see if something like red bugs or nudibranchs or anything like that come about. You just want to be able to observe the coral. I know a lot of us don't have the luxury of having a separate system. I didn't have it for a long period of time, but always dip your coral. Always make sure you clean the frag, scrape them with a brush. If you can, remove the coral from the frag and put it on a clean one. I mean, if you have the ability to do that. A lot of corals are encrusted by then, but just dip your coral, clean it before adding it to the reef tank. Okay, number 9, avoid adding 2-part solutions at the same time in the same location. Basically, if you add calcium and alkalinity at the same time in the same location, they will actually come together, precipitate out, and be essentially useless to the reef tank. Now, what I like to do is I have my dosing pump set up where every hour on that hour I'll have alkalinity dose, and then every half an hour after that I'll have calcium dose. So there's a half an hour period between the dosing of each additive, and that just makes sure that they have no chances of ever coming together in the water column. All right, number 10, avoid using those cheap plastic hydrometers and just go ahead and get yourself a quality refractometer. They're like $25, $30, which you can calibrate and get more precise readings. Salinity is a big deal in the reef tank, and having the proper level is vital to the success of your SPS coral. So having a swing arm that it goes between 1.023 and 1.027, and you kind of got to guess what it is between, that's too big of a fluctuation. Get yourself the refractometer and just get the precise reading. Okay, number 11, avoid using a hang on the back overflow. Now, I personally used them before and regretted them immediately. Basically what happens, guys, is you are fighting an uphill battle against gravity and you will lose. Anytime you got to bring water over the rim of a tank, it's just setting yourself up for failure. Even those people who have the aqua lifter pump priming that suction, it's still going to fail eventually. Now what happens when this fails? Well, basically you're no longer returning water into the sump, so the water is going to overflow the tank, and then depending on your ATO reservoir, once the water gets low in the sump, you're going to pump fresh water into the sump, and then that will be eventually pumped into the main display. Now, depending on the size of your ATO reservoir, you might just actually turn your salt water into a freshwater tank or drop the salinity low enough where it ends up killing everything within the tank. Not only do you do that, but you destroy your rug, your carpet, or if you are on the second floor, you destroy your neighbor. I mean, there's just so many things that can happen that are negative. It's just not worth it. And frankly, in this hobby, if there are risks that can be avoided, do it. There's so many other things that you can avoid that you have to worry about. Why take the risk of doing something by not drilling your tank and then have to worry about that? All right, number 12, avoid purchasing cheap heaters. In my experience in this hobby, you really do get what you pay for when it comes to purchasing heaters. I know on the cheaper ones, the internal thermostat there has a better chance of failing opposed to more expensive one just because of quality of parts. But the only exception to this rule would be is if you have an aquarium controller. In my situation, I have two 300-watt heaters that I spent a total of $14 on eBay, and they've been on my reef tank for over a year. The catch is that the aquarium controller dictates when they turn on and off, so I don't have to rely on that internal thermostat. Now, if you don't have an aquarium controller, I recommend that you get not only a quality heater, but you get multiple of them to cover if one was to fail. In my situation, if a heater was to fail, I would notice the subtle dip in temperature when it comes to the reef tank, and that's how I know that one of my heaters would fail, and then I would go in there and test and see which one didn't work and then replace it accordingly. All right, number 13, this is something I see beginners struggle with often, and that is adjusting water parameters too quickly within the reef tank. A lot of people who start getting into corals, or they need to adjust their salinity or something like that because it might be too low, they tend to make the adjustment too quickly. Now, if you're jumping 3 or 4 points in salinity in a short period of time, that could be very bad, especially if you have coral within the tank. I know that fish can adjust down better than they can adjust up in salinity, so be wary of that if you're making adjustments within your reef tank. Also, for those of you who are starting to use Kalkwasser or 2-part from like BRS, you really need to go slow with that stuff because a little bit will go a long way, especially in a tank that's not stocked. And I'm assuming if you're just learning how to use these things, you don't really have a lot of coral. So be wary of how much you're adding. Whenever I make adjustments on my two-part dosing, which I do pretty much on a monthly basis now, I like to set it to the new amount, which might be 10 milliliters more than I was doing previously. And what I do is I let that run for 2 weeks and then test the water to see where my levels are currently at. If I'm still dropping in alkalinity or calcium, then I know that I need to add a little bit more. But if my levels are either where they are or they're increased just a little bit, I know that I'm good with that amount of two-part. Either way, guys, just go slow when making adjustments to water parameters within your reef. It's better to go slow, steady, win the race than to rush and potentially lose everything. Finally, number 14, avoid doing anything in this hobby without the proper research. Now, I know I have a lot of how-to and tutorial videos, and I get a lot of comments saying, thanks for this video, I'm going to go ahead and try this now. I do appreciate that, guys, but I recommend you go look at another source, go look at another YouTube channel, go look at the forums or an article. Get it from multiple angles because I'm going to miss stuff. I'm not perfect. I mess up all the time, and that's how I got where I am in this hobby, by messing up enough to now teach people not to mess up or at least avoid it. Now, I recommend that you always get the research from multiple sources because there's just going to be stuff that I miss that you might have missed at another article. It's just how it is. So before you start anything, bring all that stuff together, weigh out the pros and cons, and then make the decision if you're going to do it in your reef tank or not. Well, guys, that's about it for this video. I appreciate you sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it and it was somewhat entertaining. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment section below. And if you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe. And along that note, I'm about 100 off of my 4,000 subscriber giveaway. So hit that subscribe button. We'll get to that giveaway and we'll send out some good stuff for you guys. Either way, I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.